I never thought I would become the guy who actually reads HOA bylaws, but when my monthly dues jumped from $200 to $400 without warning, I became very interested in the fine print. The letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in March, tucked between a credit card offer and a grocery store circular. It was printed on cheap paper with the Meadowbrook Estates HOA letterhead, and the message was short. Effective immediately, all homeowners would see their monthly assessments doubled to cover necessary community improvements. No explanation of what those improvements were, no vote, no discussion, just pay up or face penalties. My name is Nathan Norris, and I bought my house in Meadowbrook Estates in Gilbert, Arizona 3 years ago. It was a decent neighborhood with palm trees lining the streets, well-maintained common areas, and reasonable HOA fees. The community had a pool, a small gym, and a playground that actually looked safe for kids. I worked as a software engineer from home, so I spent a lot of time in my house, and I took pride in keeping it nice. I painted the exterior the approved shade of beige, kept my lawn green despite the desert heat, and never left my trash cans out past collection day. I followed every single rule in that thick packet of CC and RS they gave me at closing. But $400 a month? That was $4,800 a year. For what? The pool was already clean. The landscaping was fine. The gym had the same 3 treadmills it had always had. Something did not add up. I called my neighbor, Marcus Reed, who lived 2 houses down. Marcus was a retired accountant with a mind for numbers and a low tolerance for nonsense. He answered on the second ring. "You got the letter?" I asked. "Yeah, I got it. Highway robbery is what it is." "Did you go to any board meetings where they discussed this?" "There was not any meeting, Nathan. I checked the community bulletin board every week. They did not post anything about a vote or a dues increase. This came out of nowhere." "Can they even do that? Just double the fees without telling anyone?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Not according to the bylaws. There has to be a vote, a proper vote with notice given to all homeowners at least 30 days in advance." "So they broke their own rules." "Looks that way." I thanked Marcus and hung up. Then I did what any reasonable person would do. I started digging through the HOA documents I had shoved in a filing cabinet and forgotten about. The bylaws were 73 pages of dense legal language, but I made myself read every word. It took me 3 hours and 2 pots of coffee, but I found exactly what I needed. Article 7, Section 3. Any increase in regular assessments exceeding 10% of the current assessment must be approved by a majority vote of the Board of Directors at a properly noticed meeting, with written notice provided to all homeowners no less than 30 days prior to the vote. Homeowners shall have the right to attend such meetings and provide comment before any vote is taken. They had not done any of that. No notice, no meeting announcement, no opportunity for homeowner input. They just sent out a letter and expected everyone to comply. I was angry, but I was also smart enough to know I could not fight this alone. The next morning, I started knocking on doors. I talked to everyone I could find who was home during the day. Most people were furious. Some were resigned, figuring they had no choice but to pay. A few told me to leave them alone because they did not want trouble with the HOA. By the end of the week, I had signatures from 42 homeowners who wanted answers. Meadowbrook Estates had 130 houses total, so 42 was not a majority, but it was enough to make noise. The HOA board consisted of 5 people. The president was a woman named Karen Keller, a 52-year-old real estate agent with blonde hair she wore in a perpetual soccer mom style and a habit of speaking to everyone like they were children. The vice president was Brian Schultz, who owned a car dealership and rarely showed up to meetings. The treasurer was Linda Hoffman, who had lived in the neighborhood for 20 years and treated the HOA funds like her personal piggy bank. The secretary was Tom Wu, a mild-mannered dentist who mostly went along with whatever Karen wanted. And the member-at-large was Patricia Vance, who had only been on the board for 6 months and seemed overwhelmed by everything. Karen ran the show. Everyone knew it. She had been president for 4 years, and during that time, she had transformed the HOA from a laid-back group that met quarterly into an enforcement machine that sent violation notices if your mailbox was not painted the exact right shade of black. I decided to attend the next board meeting, which according to the schedule posted on the community website was supposed to happen on the first Thursday of every month. That gave me 2 weeks to prepare. In the meantime, I reached out to a lawyer. I did not have money for a big legal battle, but I knew a guy from college who had gone into real estate law. His name was David Chen, and he owed me a favor from when I helped him move into his condo 5 years ago. I called him and explained the situation. "They definitely violated the bylaws," David said after I read him the relevant sections. "And if they took a vote without proper notice, that vote is invalid." So what do? Go to the meeting. Bring copies of the bylaws. Cite the specific sections they violated. Demand that they rescind the increase and hold a proper vote. And if they refuse, then we file an injunction. But let me come with you to the meeting. Sometimes having a lawyer present is enough to make people think twice about doing something stupid. I agreed, and David said he would meet me at the community center on the night of the meeting. The next 2 weeks crawled by. I spent my time reading more of the bylaws, documenting every violation I could find. It turned out Karen and her board had been playing fast and loose with the rules for a while. They had approved expenditures without proper votes, failed to provide financial reports to homeowners, and even amended certain rules without following the amendment procedures outlined in the governing documents. I also discovered something interesting. According to the Treasurer's report from 6 months ago, which was buried on the HOA website, the community had over $200,000 in reserve funds. That was more than enough to cover any reasonable improvements or maintenance. So why did they need to double our dues? I printed everything out. I made copies. I organized it all in a binder with colored tabs. If Karen wanted to play games, I was ready to play. The Thursday of the board meeting arrived. It was early April, and the Arizona heat was starting to creep up. I wore jeans and a button-down shirt, nothing too formal, but presentable enough to be taken seriously. David met me in the parking lot of the community center at 6:45. The meeting was scheduled for 7. "You ready for this?" David asked. He was carrying a leather briefcase and looked every bit the lawyer. "As ready as I will ever be." We walked into the community center together. The meeting room was small, with about 30 folding chairs set up in rows facing a long table where the board members would sit. A few people were already there, mostly older residents who attended every meeting out of habit. Marcus was there, sitting in the back row. He gave me a nod when I walked in. I chose a seat in the front row, right in the center. David sat next to me. I wanted Karen to see me the moment she walked in. I wanted her to know I was not going away. At 7 sharp, the board members filed in. Karen came first, carrying a stack of papers and wearing a bright pink blazer that hurt to look at. She smiled at the small crowd like she was greeting fans at a meet and greet. Brian came next, checking his phone and barely looking up. Linda followed, then Tom, and finally Patricia, who looked nervous. They took their seats. Karen banged a gavel on the table even though the room was already quiet. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming to the April meeting of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA Board of Directors. We have a short agenda tonight, so we should be done quickly." I raised my hand. Karen looked at me like I had just farted in church. "Yes? I have some questions about the recent dues increase." "That matter has already been decided. If you have questions, you can submit them in writing." "Actually, I would like to address it now. According to the bylaws, homeowners have the right to speak during meetings." Karen's smile tightened. "The homeowner comment period comes at the end of the meeting. If you can wait until then, you will have your chance to speak." "That is fine," I said, sitting back down. David gave me a slight nod. We were playing this by the book. The meeting dragged on. They discussed landscaping bids, pool maintenance schedules, and a complaint about someone's unauthorized fence. It was all incredibly boring, and I could tell most of the people in the room were struggling to stay awake. But I stayed focused, watching Karen the whole time. Finally, after 30 minutes, Karen announced it was time for homeowner comments. I stood up immediately. "State your name and address for the record," Karen said, her voice dripping with false politeness. "Nathan Norris, 2247 Saguaro Lane." "Go ahead." I opened my binder. "I am here to address the recent dues increase that was implemented without proper notice or a vote. According to Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA Bylaws, any increase in assessments exceeding 10% requires a properly noticed board meeting with written notice to all homeowners at least 30 days in advance. No such notice was provided." Karen's face went red. "The board held a vote." "When?" "That is board business." Actually, it is homeowner business. The bylaws require transparency. So I will ask again. When did the board vote to increase the dues? Brian looked at Linda. Linda looked at Tom. Patricia stared at her hands. Karen cleared her throat. The board held a special meeting 3 weeks ago. We voted to increase the assessments to fund necessary improvements. And where was the notice for this special meeting? It was posted. Where? On the website. I pulled out another document from my binder. I checked the website every day for the past month. There was no notice of a special meeting. I have screenshots showing the calendar page with no meeting listed. David stood up. My name is David Chen, and I am legal counsel for Mr. Norris. I have reviewed the bylaws, and it is clear that the board failed to follow proper procedures. The vote to increase assessments is invalid. Karen stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You cannot just bring a lawyer to a board meeting and start making accusations. Actually, homeowners have the right to bring legal representation to HOA meetings, David said calmly. It is covered under Arizona state law. This is ridiculous. Karen snapped. The board voted and the decision stands. If you do not like it, you can take it up with a judge. We will, I said. But first I want to know where the money is going. According to the treasurer's report from October, the HOA has over $200,000 in reserves. Why do we need to double our dues when we have that much money sitting in the bank? Linda, the treasurer, shifted uncomfortably. Those reserves are for emergencies. What kind of emergencies require $200,000? What improvements are you planning that cost so much money? No one answered. I kept going. I also noticed that the board approved a contract with Prestige Landscaping last month. The contract is for $75,000 a year. That is 3 times what we were paying our previous landscaping company. And guess who owns Prestige Landscaping? I pulled out another document and held it up. It was a business registration from the Arizona Corporation Commission. Karen Keller is listed as the registered agent for Prestige Landscaping, LLC. The room erupted. People started shouting questions. Marcus stood up and demanded an explanation. Even some of the board members looked shocked. Patricia looked like she was about to cry. Karen's face went from red to purple. That is a legitimate business. There is nothing illegal about the board hiring a company I happen to own. Actually, there is, David said. Arizona law prohibits HOA board members from entering into contracts with companies they own or have a financial interest in without full disclosure to the homeowners and a vote. It is called self-dealing, and it is illegal. Karen grabbed her papers and shoved them into her bag. I do not have to sit here and listen to this. This meeting is adjourned. She stormed out of the room. Brian and Linda followed her, leaving Tom and Patricia sitting at the table looking shell-shocked. Tom cleared his throat. I did not know about the landscaping company. Karen told us it was the best bid. Did you see the other bids? I asked. There were not any other bids. Karen said Prestige was the only company that responded. So she lied, Marcus said from the back of the room. Tom did not respond. He just gathered his things and left. Patricia stayed for a moment, then approached me. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I only joined the board a few months ago. I did not know any of this was happening. Karen handles everything. She tells us what to vote on, and we vote. Did you vote to increase the dues? I asked. Patricia nodded. But I thought it was legitimate. Karen said we needed the money for repairs. She showed us some estimates for roof work on the community center and pool resurfacing. Do you have copies of those estimates? No. Karen keeps all the documents. David handed Patricia his business card. If you want to do the right thing, you will get us those documents, and you will consider resigning from the board before this gets worse. Patricia took the card and left without another word. The meeting room cleared out slowly. People stopped to thank me and shake my hand. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder and told me I had done a good job, but I did not feel victorious. I felt angry. Karen had been stealing from the neighborhood, and who knew how long it had been going on. Over the next few days, things moved quickly. Patricia resigned from the board and sent David copies of every document she could find, including emails between Karen and the other board members. The emails were damning. They showed that Karen had pressured the board to vote for the dues increase without telling them about her landscaping company. She had also inflated the cost estimates for the community center repairs and pocketed the difference. David filed a lawsuit against the HOA and Karen personally, alleging breach of fiduciary duty, self-dealing, and fraud. He also filed a complaint with the Arizona Attorney General's office, which had a division that handled HOA fraud cases. The story hit the local news. A reporter from a Gilbert newspaper called me and asked for an interview. I agreed, and the article ran on the front page of the local section. HOA president accused of fraud, the headline read. It included a photo of Karen from the HOA website and quotes from several homeowners who felt betrayed. Karen tried to fight back. She sent an email to all the homeowners claiming I was spreading lies and that she had done nothing wrong. But no one believed her. More homeowners started coming forward with their own complaints about Karen's behavior over the years. One couple said Karen had fined them $500 for painting their front door the wrong shade of red, even though the color was listed as approved in the CC and Rs. Another homeowner said Karen had threatened to put a lien on his house because his grass was half an inch too long. The board called an emergency meeting to address the situation. This time, the community center was packed. Every chair was filled, and people stood along the walls. I sat in the front row again, with David next to me. Karen was not there. Brian, who was now acting as president, opened the meeting. "Thank you all for coming," Brian said. He looked exhausted. "I want to start by saying that the board takes these allegations very seriously. We have hired an independent auditor to review the HOA finances, and we are cooperating fully with the Attorney General's investigation." "What about the dues increase?" someone shouted from the back. "The board is rescinding the dues increase, effective immediately. Anyone who already paid the higher amount will receive a refund." There was applause, but it was scattered. People were still angry. Marcus stood up. "What about Karen? Is she still on the board?" "Karen has resigned," Brian said, "as of this morning." More applause, louder this time. "What about the landscaping contract?" I asked. "We are terminating the contract with Prestige Landscaping and soliciting new bids from other companies." "And the money Karen stole?" Brian hesitated. "That is still being investigated. If the auditor finds evidence of misappropriated funds, we will pursue legal action." The meeting continued for another hour, with homeowners asking questions and demanding accountability. Brian did his best to answer, but it was clear he was in over his head. Linda, the treasurer, resigned during the meeting, admitting that she had known about some of Karen's schemes, but had been too afraid to speak up. Tom, the secretary, also resigned, saying he could not be part of a board that had lost the trust of the community. That left Brian as the only remaining board member. He announced that the HOA would hold a special election to fill the vacant seats and that he would not be running for re-election. The independent audit took 6 weeks. The auditor was a forensic accountant named Jennifer Tran, and she was thorough. She went through every bank statement, every invoice, every receipt. What she found was worse than anyone expected. Karen had been embezzling money from the HOA for 3 years. She had created fake invoices from her landscaping company and other businesses she controlled. She had also been charging personal expenses to the HOA credit card, including vacations, restaurant meals, and even a new car. In total, she had stolen over $150,000. The audit report was presented at a homeowner meeting in late May. Jennifer walked everyone through her findings, pointing out specific transactions that were fraudulent. The room was silent as she spoke. When she finished, someone asked what would happen next. "That is up to the homeowners and law enforcement," Jennifer said. "But based on what I found, there is clear evidence of criminal activity." David stood up. "I have already shared the audit report with the Attorney General's office and the Gilbert Police Department. They are opening a criminal investigation." 2 weeks later, Karen was arrested. I was not there when it happened, but Marcus called me to tell me about it. The police had shown up at her house early in the morning with a warrant. They led her out in handcuffs while her neighbors watched. The local news covered it, showing footage of Karen being put into a police car. She looked smaller somehow, less intimidating without her blazer and her gavel. Karen was charged with theft, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. The charges carried a potential sentence of up to 10 years in prison. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the Attorney General's office was not interested in being lenient. HOA fraud was a growing problem in Arizona, and they wanted to make an example. The trial took place in October. I attended every day, sitting in the gallery with Marcus and a few other homeowners. Karen's defense was that she had not intended to steal anything, that she had simply made mistakes with the accounting. But the evidence was overwhelming. Jennifer Tran testified about the fraudulent invoices. David testified about the self-dealing and the illegal dues increase. Patricia testified about how Karen had manipulated the board. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Karen guilty on all counts. At the sentencing hearing in November, the judge was blunt. You were entrusted with the responsibility of managing your community's funds, and you violated that trust in the most egregious way possible. You stole from your neighbors, people who trusted you and relied on you to do the right thing. This kind of behavior cannot be tolerated. Karen was sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA, including all the money she had stolen plus interest. She was also banned from serving on any HOA board in Arizona for life. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse with David and Marcus. The air was cool, and the sky was a deep blue. It felt like we could finally breathe. You did good, Nathan, David said. Most people would have just paid the higher dues and moved on. I could not let her get away with it, I said. Marcus shook his head. I still cannot believe she thought she could pull this off. Did she really think no one would notice? She had been getting away with it for 3 years, I said. I guess she thought she was untouchable. We stood there for a few more minutes, not saying much, just taking it all in. Then we went our separate ways. The HOA held elections in December. I did not run for the board. I had no interest in dealing with that kind of responsibility. But I voted for people I trusted, people who had been vocal about demanding transparency and accountability. Marcus ran for president and won. He immediately implemented new policies requiring regular financial audits and mandatory training for board members on fiduciary duties. The landscaping contract went to a local company that had been in business for 20 years and had excellent reviews. They charged less than half what Karen's company had been charging, and they did better work. The community started to feel different. People were more engaged, more willing to attend meetings and ask questions. The board meetings were no longer just a formality where Karen handed down edicts. They became actual discussions where homeowners had a voice. As for me, I went back to my normal life. I worked from home, maintained my lawn, and enjoyed the peace and quiet of my neighborhood. But I kept a copy of the HOA bylaws in my desk drawer, just in case, because I learned something important through all of this. The rules only matter if people are willing to enforce them. Karen had counted on everyone being too busy or too apathetic to care. She had been wrong. One evening in early December, I was sitting on my back patio watching the sunset when my phone rang. It was David. Hey Nathan, I wanted to give you an update. The restitution payments started coming in. The HOA is getting the money back. That's good news. Yeah, Karen's lawyer worked out a payment plan. She's going to be paying it off for a long time, but at least the community will get made whole. Did she say anything? Any apology? No, she still thinks she did nothing wrong. Her lawyer said she believes she was targeted unfairly. I was not surprised. People like Karen never took responsibility. They always found a way to blame someone else. Thanks for letting me know, I said. No problem, and hey, if you ever need a lawyer again, you know where to find me. Let us hope I do not. We hung up and I went back to watching the sunset. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, and the desert air had that crisp quality it gets in the winter. Everything felt settled, resolved. The neighborhood was healing. A few weeks later, Christmas decorations started going up around Meadowbrook Estates. Strings of lights wrapped around palm trees, inflatable Santas appeared on lawns, and someone put a giant menorah in their front window. It was festive and cheerful, and for the first time in months, I felt like things were back to normal. On Christmas Eve, I hosted a small party at my house. I invited Marcus and his wife, a few other neighbors who had supported me during the fight with Karen, and David and his girlfriend. We drank wine, ate too much food, and told stories about the craziest HOA violations we had ever heard of. It was a good night, the kind of night that reminded me why I loved living in this neighborhood. As everyone was leaving, Marcus pulled me aside. I wanted to thank you, he said, for what you did. You could have just paid the higher dues like everyone else. But you did not. You stood up and fought, and you saved this community. I just did what anyone would do. No, you did not. Most people would have complained but done nothing. You actually took action. That matters. I did not know what to say, so I just nodded. Marcus clapped me on the shoulder and left. After everyone was gone, I cleaned up and sat on my couch, looking at my Christmas tree. It was a small fake tree with white lights and a few ornaments, nothing fancy. But it made the house feel warm and lived in. I thought about everything that had happened over the past 9 months. The anger I had felt when I got that letter about the dues increase, the hours I had spent reading bylaws and gathering evidence, the nervousness I had felt walking into that first board meeting with David, the satisfaction of watching Karen's lies unravel, the relief when the jury delivered the guilty verdict. It had been exhausting and stressful and sometimes scary, but it had also been necessary. Because if I had not stood up, Karen would still be stealing from the neighborhood. She would still be abusing her power and making people's lives miserable. And the next person who bought a house in Meadowbrook Estates would have inherited the same problems. I finished my wine and turned off the Christmas tree lights. Tomorrow was Christmas, and I planned to sleep in and do absolutely nothing. I had earned it. The following year was quiet. Marcus ran the HOA with integrity and transparency. The new board members were engaged and responsible. Financial reports were posted on the website every month. Homeowners were encouraged to attend meetings and ask questions. It was everything an HOA should be. In March, exactly 1 year after I had received that letter about the dues increase, the HOA held its annual meeting. I attended, along with about 50 other homeowners. Marcus presented the financial report, which showed that the community was in excellent shape. The reserves were healthy, the assessments were reasonable, and there were no outstanding debts or legal issues. At the end of the meeting, Marcus made an announcement. I want to take a moment to recognize someone who made all of this possible. A year ago, our community was in crisis. We had a board that was corrupt and a president who was stealing from us. One person had the courage to stand up and fight back, and because of him, we are where we are today. Nathan Norris, can you stand up? I felt my face go red as everyone turned to look at me. I stood up reluctantly. Nathan, on behalf of the entire community, thank you. You saved us. Everyone applauded. It was loud and genuine, and I felt a lump in my throat. I nodded and sat back down as quickly as I could. After the meeting, people came up to shake my hand and thank me. It was overwhelming in a good way. I had not done it for the recognition, but it felt good to know that people appreciated what I had done. As I was leaving, a young couple approached me. They looked like they were in their late 20s and they were holding hands. Excuse me, are you Nathan Norris? The woman asked. Yeah, that is me. We just bought a house here last month. When we were doing our research, we read about what you did. It is one of the reasons we decided to buy in this neighborhood. We wanted to live somewhere where people actually care about doing the right thing. Well, welcome to the neighborhood, I said. I think you will be happy here. They thanked me and walked away. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, watching people get into their cars and drive home. The community center was lit up against the dark sky, and I could hear kids laughing on the playground nearby. This was what it was all about. Not the legal battles or the news coverage or the recognition. It was about making sure people could live in their homes without being taken advantage of. It was about holding the powerful accountable and making sure everyone played by the same rules. I got in my car and drove home. My house was dark except for the porch light, which I always left on. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, grateful for the quiet and the familiarity of my own space. The next morning, I went for a run through the neighborhood. The sun was just coming up and the streets were empty. I passed houses with perfectly manicured lawns, kids' bikes left in driveways, and cars parked in garages. It looked like any other suburban neighborhood in Arizona. But I knew it was different. This was a place where people had stood up for themselves. This was a place where corruption had been exposed and justice had been served. As I ran, I thought about Karen. She was sitting in a prison cell somewhere, probably still believing she had done nothing wrong. I wondered if she ever thought about the people she had hurt, the trust she had violated. Probably not. People like Karen did not have that kind of self-awareness. But it did not matter. She had been stopped, and the community had moved on. That was enough. I finished my run and went home to shower and start my workday. I had a deadline coming up for a project, and I needed to focus. But as I sat at my computer, I felt a sense of peace that I had not felt in a long time. I had done something important. I had made a difference, and that was worth more than any amount of money or recognition. Over the following months, I stayed involved with the HOA, but not in an official capacity. I attended meetings when I could and kept an eye on the financials. Marcus did a great job as president, and the new board was functioning well. There were no scandals, no secret votes, no embezzlement. Just a normal, boring HOA doing what it was supposed to do. In June, I ran into Patricia at the grocery store. She looked different, lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "Nathan, hi," she said, smiling. "Hey, Patricia, how have you been?" "Good. Really good, actually. I wanted to thank you for what you did. I know I was part of the board when all that stuff was happening, and I feel terrible about it. But you gave me the courage to do the right thing. You did that yourself. You are the one who gave us the documents. Still, I would not have done it if you had not stood up first. So thank you." We talked for a few more minutes, catching up on neighborhood gossip. She told me she had started volunteering at a local animal shelter and was thinking about getting a dog. I told her about a project I was working on. It was a normal, pleasant conversation, the kind neighbors have when they run into each other at the store. As I drove home, I thought about how far the neighborhood had come. A year ago, people were angry and scared, unsure if they could trust the board. Now, things were stable and peaceful. The community was thriving. That summer, the HOA organized a neighborhood barbecue at the community center. It was the first big community event in years, and almost everyone showed up. There were hamburgers and hot dogs, a bounce house for the kids, and a dunk tank that raised money for the pool fund. Marcus got dunked 3 times, laughing the whole time. I brought potato salad and spent the afternoon talking to neighbors I had never really gotten to know. There was a retired teacher named Sandra who had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. There was a young family with twin toddlers who had just moved in from California. There was an engineer named Raj who worked at Intel and shared my love of terrible science fiction movies. It was a good day, the kind of day that made me remember why I had fought so hard for this community. These were good people who deserved to live in a place where they were treated fairly and with respect. As the sun started to set and people began packing up their things, Marcus came over to where I was sitting. "Good turnout," he said. "Yeah, it was great. You know, I have been thinking. We should make this an annual thing. Get everyone together, build community. That is what an HOA is supposed to be about." "I think that is a good idea." Marcus sat down next to me. "I wanted to ask you something. Have you thought about running for the board? We have 2 seats opening up in December." "No, I have not. I do not think I would be good at it." "I think you would be great at it. You care about this place. You understand the rules. And people trust you. Maybe someday, but not right now. I'm happy just being a regular homeowner who shows up to meetings and asks annoying questions." Marcus laughed. "Fair enough. But if you change your mind, let me know." We sat there for a while, watching kids run around the playground and parents chat by the grill. The lights around the pool came on, casting a soft glow over everything. It was peaceful and perfect, and I felt grateful to be part of it. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey I had been on. It had started with a single letter about a dues increase and had turned into something much bigger. I had learned about HOA law, hired a lawyer, attended countless meetings, and helped expose a criminal conspiracy. I had been angry and frustrated and exhausted, but I had also been determined and focused and unwilling to give up, and in the end, it had been worth it. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my car for a moment, looking at my house. It was just a house, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, with a 2-car garage and a small backyard. But it was mine, and I had fought to protect it and the community it was part of. I got out of the car and went inside, ready to start the next chapter of my life. Whatever that looked like, I knew I was ready for it. Because I had learned something important over the past year and a half. Sometimes you have to stand up and fight for what is right, even when it is hard, even when you are scared, even when it would be easier to just go along with things. The rules matter. Integrity matters, and people who abuse their power need to be held accountable. As I got ready for bed that night, I thought about Karen one more time. She had tried to steal from the neighborhood and had ended up losing everything. Her reputation was destroyed, her freedom was taken away, and her legacy was one of corruption and greed. It was a cautionary tale about what happens when people put their own interests ahead of the community they are supposed to serve. But our neighborhood had survived. We had come together, held the board accountable, and rebuilt trust. We had proven that ordinary people could make a difference if they were willing to stand up and fight. I turned off the lights and climbed into bed. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. It was a normal night in a normal neighborhood, but I knew it was more than that. It was a neighborhood where justice had been served, where corruption had been exposed, where people had refused to be victims, and I was proud to be part of it. In the months that followed, life continued in its steady rhythm. I worked on my software projects, met deadlines, and occasionally took breaks to walk around the neighborhood. Every time I passed the community center, I remembered that first meeting where I had confronted Karen. Every time I saw the pool or the playground, I thought about how close we had come to losing control of our own community. But we had not lost. We had won. By the fall, Karen's restitution payments had restored most of the stolen funds to the HOA. The board used some of that money to finally do the necessary repairs on the community center roof and resurface the pool, the very projects Karen had claimed to be funding with the dues increase. The work was done by reputable contractors who submitted competitive bids, and everything was documented and transparent. The neighborhood continued to thrive. New families moved in, attracted by the reasonable HOA fees and the strong sense of community. The board remained stable and responsible. And life went on. I never forgot what I had learned, though. I kept that binder with the bylaws and all my research in my home office, a reminder of what had happened and what I had been capable of. Every now and then, someone in the neighborhood would face an issue with the HOA, something minor usually. They would call me for advice. I always told them the same thing: read the bylaws, know your rights, and do not be afraid to speak up. Because that was the lesson of this whole experience. HOAs only have as much power as homeowners give them. If you stay informed, if you hold the board accountable, if you refuse to let them operate in secret, then they have to follow the rules like everyone else. It was a simple lesson, but an important one, and it was one I would carry with me for the rest of my life. 1 year turned into 2, and then 3. Marcus served 2 terms as HOA president before stepping down, proud of what he had accomplished. The board continued to function well, with new members rotating in and bringing fresh perspectives. The community grew and changed, but the foundation of transparency and accountability remained strong. As for me, I eventually did run for the board. It was 4 years after the whole Karen situation, and Marcus convinced me it was time. I served 1 term as treasurer, making sure every dollar was accounted for and every financial report was clear and accessible. It was not glamorous work, but it was important, and it felt good to give back to the community that had become such an important part of my life. When my term ended, I stepped down, content that I had done my part. I went back to being a regular homeowner, but one who never took the community for granted. I attended meetings, I voted in elections, and I stayed informed, because I knew what could happen when people stopped paying attention. Karen was released from prison after serving 3 years of her 5-year sentence. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to Nevada and was working as a receptionist at a dental office. She was still paying off her restitution and would be for many more years. I did not feel sorry for her. She had made her choices, and she was living with the consequences. As for Meadowbrook Estates, it continued to be a great place to live. The palm trees grew taller, the community center got a fresh coat of paint, and kids learned to swim in the pool every summer. It was everything a neighborhood should be, and I was grateful to be part of it. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized that the fight with Karen had changed me. It had taught me that I was capable of more than I thought. It had shown me the importance of standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult, and it had given me a deeper appreciation for the community I lived in and the people who made it special. I never expected to become the person who took on the HOA, but when the moment came, I did what needed to be done. and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Because at the end of the day, your home is more than just a building. It is where you live your life, where you make memories, where you feel safe and secure. And nobody has the right to take that away from you, not even the HOA. The bylaws existed for a reason. The rules existed for a reason. And when someone violated those rules, it was up to the rest of us to hold them accountable. That was the story of how I took on the HOA and won. It was not easy and it was not quick, but it was worth it. And I hoped that by sharing this story, others would find the courage to stand up when they faced similar situations. Because corruption thrives in silence. But when people speak up, when they demand transparency and accountability, when they refuse to be intimidated, corruption cannot survive. That was what I learned. That was what I would never forget. And that was why, years later, I could sit on my back patio and watch the sunset over Meadowbrook Estates with a sense of peace and pride, knowing that I had made a difference in my small corner of the world.